Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating, data-driven investigation. We're going to pop the hood on modern society and see how the world actually works. We're stripping away all those surface layers of complication, ignoring the talking heads, and taking a hard, unfiltered look at the numbers. So get ready, because we are definitely going to challenge some of your biggest assumptions today.
Let's kick things off with a weird one. What do school teachers and sumo wrestlers have in common? I know, it sounds like the setup to a bizarre joke, right? But stick with me. I promise you, by the end of this explainer, you're going to know exactly what links the people molding young minds in Chicago with the giant athletes of Japan's most sacred sport. It's a huge mystery, and we're about to solve it together.
All right, let's get right into our source material. We're looking at the groundbreaking book, Freakonomics, by Stephen D. Levitt and Stephen J. Dubner. Now, Levitt is this rogue economist who basically acts like a forensic detective. Instead of obsessing over boring stuff like stock markets or inflation rates, he uses hard data to uncover the hidden side of human behavior. He asks the questions literally no one else is asking, and he just lets the data tell the story. Chapter 1. The Hidden Side. Seeing the World Through Data.
Look, to truly understand the world around us, we have to look past our own biases and conventional wisdom. We have to focus strictly on what the numbers are telling us. On one side, we have morality, right? That represents how we would like the world to work. But on the exact opposite side, we have economics, which shows us how the world actually works. If we're going to get to the truth, we absolutely must separate our high-minded moral ideals from the base, mathematical realities of human behavior.
When you apply that totally objective lens, the data completely shatters conventional wisdom. Let's look at 3 quick examples from the text. First, back in the 1990s, the experts predicted a massive surge in violent crime. But instead, it plummeted. The author's data points to a really distant, unexpected cause, the legalization of abortion years earlier through Roe v. Wade. The data showed that millions of children who would have been statistically most likely to be born into adverse, high-crime environments were not born. Second, look at politics. The numbers prove that campaign spending doesn't actually buy elections. It turns out appealing candidates attract money, not the other way around. And what about your real estate agent? Well, the data shows they actually leave their own homes on the market an average of 10 days longer than yours, just to hold out for a better offer, all while encouraging you to take the first decent offer that comes along. See, they're human, and they respond to their own circumstances.
Moving on to Chapter 2, The Anatomy of Incentives, the forensic investigator's magnifying glass.
So if data is our map here, the study of incentives is our magnifying glass. An incentive is simply a way of urging people to do more of a good thing or less of a bad thing. And there are 3 basic flavors. You've got economic, like a $3 sin tax on a pack of cigarettes; social, like banning smoking in restaurants so you don't look like a jerk in front of other people; and moral, like the government asserting that buying black market cigarettes actually funds terrorism. The most powerful incentives in our society, they usually combine all 3 of these to really shape how we act.
Now this is fascinating. An economic experiment at daycare centers in Haifa, Israel, perfectly demonstrates what happens when these different incentives clash. Researchers were studying 10 daycare centers where parents were constantly showing up late to pick up their kids. So the Economist decided to introduce a fine. Any parent more than 10 minutes late would have to pay a $3 penalty. They basically swapped a moral incentive, the guilt of keeping the poor teacher waiting, for a purely economic one.
And guess what happened? After the fine was introduced, the late pickups didn't drop at all. In fact, they more than doubled. They jumped to 20 late pickups a week. Why? Well, because for just $3, parents could simply buy off their guilt. The fine was way too cheap. By slapping a literal price tag on the penalty, the daycare center accidentally signaled to the parents that being late wasn't really a big deal anymore.
Which brings us to a slightly darker truth about human nature. As the great W.C. Fields once said, a thing worth having is a thing worth cheating for. And it's true. If an incentive is strong enough, people will absolutely try to game the system.
Which leads us to Chapter 3, Catching Cheating Teachers, the Dark Side of Incentives. Back in the 1990s, the Chicago public school system brought in high-stakes testing. This put an unbelievable amount of pressure on teachers to get good scores. I mean, if students scored low, a school could literally be shut down and the teachers fired. But if they scored high, teachers got praised and promoted. So how in the world do you catch a cheating teacher out of hundreds of thousands of tests? Well, you look at the data. Researchers built this absolutely brilliant cheating algorithm. First, the algorithm scanned for highly unusual answer patterns. Picture a whole block of struggling students magically getting the exact same string of the hardest questions right, all at the very end of the test. Second, it looked for erratic performance over time, classes that miraculously spiked in performance one year only to crash right back down the next.
And here is the smoking gun. Look at this. In 5th grade, terrible scores. In 7th grade, terrible scores. But in 6th grade, a miraculous, completely unbelievable spike. The algorithm caught teachers who were literally taking erasers to their students' wrong answers and filling in the correct ones before handing the tests in. The cheating teacher was just helping herself keep her job. She definitely wasn't helping her struggling students, who were being set up for a terrible shock when they inevitably failed the very next year.
Let's turn to Chapter 4, Rigging the Sumo Ring, Corruption in Sacred Spaces. When we take that exact same data-driven magnifying glass and hold it up to a seemingly untouchable, sacred space like Japanese sumo, things get really interesting. See, a sumo tournament requires 15 bouts. To maintain your elite ranking, which literally dictates your entire livelihood, your wealth, your status, you need a winning record. That means at least 8 wins. This creates a really intense situation called being on the bubble. A wrestler entering the final day with a 7-7 record is absolutely desperate, but his opponent? Maybe he has an 8-6 record and has already secured his rank. So the incentive gap between these two guys is massive.
Now, statistically speaking, based on past matchups between these exact same fighters, the 7-7 wrestler should win about 48.7% of the time against an 8-6 opponent. It's basically a coin toss, a statistically even match. But in reality, the desperate wrestler on the bubble wins a staggering 79.6% of the time, almost 8 out of 10 matches. I mean, how is that even possible?
The real reveal is hiding in the follow-up data. When these exact same two wrestlers meet in the very next tournament, and neither one is on the bubble, the guy who just won 80% of the time suddenly only wins 40% of the time. Wow, it heavily implies a quid pro quo agreement, right? Basically, hey, let me win today when my career is on the line, and I'll throw the match to you next time around. It just goes to show, even in a highly revered, sacred sport, powerful incentives can totally corrupt.
Chapter 5. The Bagel Honor System, the white-collar honor system.
Now, before we lose all faith in humanity today, let's look at some hidden data that doesn't reveal a dark side. Meet Paul Feldman. He actually quit his job as a researcher in Washington to sell bagels. He would drop off bagels and a little wooden cash basket in corporate break rooms in the morning, and then he'd return at lunch to collect the money and whatever leftovers were there. It was a pure 100% honor system. But by keeping rigorous, meticulous records of exactly how many bagels were left and how much cash was in the basket, Feldman accidentally created a perfect, massive data set to measure everyday white-collar honesty.
And their results are actually kind of uplifting. Despite having every opportunity in the world to steal a bagel without any consequences, Feldman's data showed an overall payment rate of about 87%. It turns out, people are generally honest, even without a strong economic penalty or a security camera watching their every move. That internal moral incentive to just do the right thing usually wins out. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and a big question I want to leave you with. In the face of hidden incentives, what would your data reveal about you? We are all being driven by economic, social, and moral forces every single day, whether we realize it or not. So the next time you make a choice, take a second and ask yourself what is really motivating you. Because as we've seen today, the data never, ever lies. Thanks so much for joining me on The Explainer, and keep questioning that conventional wisdom.